I would like to invite, as I said, Alison Dlgitti from the Getty Conservation Institute. Alison will give us the lecture on behalf of herself and Dennis Watrich, who unfortunately could not join us for the conference, although he was part of the entire process of structuring the conference. Alison is a senior project manager and the manager of the Web and Digital Initiatives Department at the Getty Conservation Institute, where she has managed development of the Arches Heritage Inventory and Management Platform and its implementation for the city of Los Angeles and for the national and local government authorities in England. She also manages development of the DISCO. Okay. Data integration for conservation science and the upgrade of the AATA online. And she previously managed development of the Middle Eastern geodatabase for antiquities. I think that's the mega project that David already mentioned in Jordan. So Alison, and as I said, Phil and David will introduce us with the Arches Heritage Inventory and Management Platform. Please and thank you.
So before we get into the demo of demoing Arches and the actual software itself, I just wanted to give you some background on why we developed Arches, why the Getty Conservation Institute developed the software. As David mentioned, the Arches project is another one of our many projects that we've had, all over the world. However, it's different in a lot of ways because we've actually created a product, and normally we work with partners and on conservation of all kinds of things. But in this particular case, we ended up building a piece of software. So in order to give you some background on what led us to do that and what some of our priorities were and some of the reasons we did that, I just thought I'd take you through a few of those points. So, first of all, right, the why, obviously, and then the key requirements that we identified for the system. So some of the objectives that we had right from the get-go, some common misconceptions, some things that we probably haven't done a good job of explaining because people all over come up with the same questions over and over again, and we think we've covered those things, but obviously we're not doing a very good job because the same questions keep coming up. And then the question of, is it really free? It's open source software, and there are still a lot of open source skeptics around, although open source is being adopted more and more, and the question is it really free? So I'll get into that just a little bit at the end. So why did we build Arches? Well, as David and Phil have already said many times in different ways, inventories are essential. Without inventories, you don't know where stuff is, and if you don't know where stuff is, you can't protect it very well. And the other thing that became clear in working, as David mentioned, in working actually originally, we had a project in Iraq, and then that turned to the project in Jordan, which turned into Mega Jordan. During that process, we learned a lot about other organizations around the world and how they struggled to build inventories. Very few, as we've seen here today from everybody basically, very few countries in the world, very few organizations have successful inventory programs with modern inventory systems. So why do they struggle? Why do organizations struggle? Well, the first thing won't be a surprise to anybody, I don't think, is it's expensive, to build certainly modern systems, but even 20 years ago, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of human resources and licensing fees and all that kind of thing. Another reason is technology is advancing more and more quickly. And the differences between that big thing in the back there and the MacBook Air that Steve Jobs is holding, that's 50 years. But probably in the next 50 years, or 40 years actually now, it's going to advance, things are going to advance even more. It seems like technology is moving at a much faster pace. And new technologies, the semantic web, all these new tools that are available take more than one person with a certain skill set. They take many skill sets. So it's no longer the case where somebody, an archaeologist who knows about GIS and knows about databases can actually create one of these modern platforms. All these skills don't really usually come in the form of one or two people. You really need a team. You need data people, you need GIS people, and so on. And then the other thing that became clear was that organisations all over were spending money doing the same thing, pretty much the same thing over and over again. So each organisation was building something, and then another organisation was building something that was very similar. And so we thought if we could build a platform that was flexible enough, broad enough, built to standards that most people could at least relate to, maybe not adopt 100%, but at least find somewhat useful. So if we could build a system that maybe addressed 85%, maybe 80%, maybe 90% of what most heritage organisations around the world needed, then that money, that little bit of money or resources that are available could be put into that 10%, and also organisations could then pool those resources for new functionality and so on. So that was our aim. Another reason why we built Archers was we care about the data. As David mentioned, our mission is to advance conservation practice, basically, in a nutshell. And data about cultural heritage is obviously really important to preserve and to make sure that it's managed and it's kept up to date and so on. It's the knowledge about heritage. And data can look like this, can look like that, a little better organised. These days, very often, it may look something like that. But the problem is that very often these days it looks like this, and it's being discarded. So old systems, you can't get the data out anymore because the operating system has changed. You have, now 4 generations, of operating systems since a particular database was created. The person who created it is no longer around. And you can't see it's not like an archive. You can't, if an archive is burning down, you're aware that you're losing something. But on a hard disk, perhaps, you don't know what's on that hard disk if you can't read it, if the software doesn't function anymore. So any one of these hard disks could represent years of work. You really don't know what you're losing. So we've tried to do the best we can in finding ways that help protect the knowledge, the data for the future. So when Archers morphs into something else 10, 15, 20, 25, maybe years from now, that data can be extracted and it's meaningful. And actually, Phil mentioned the CDOC CRM, the ontology that we've used, and that's part of this. By using that ontology, by structuring our data to those standards, the data, it renders the data self-describing in a way. So the data, when it's extracted from any system, comes with metadata about it. So you don't just get the value and you need the original system to know what that value means. For example, a value you may get out of a database is silver, perhaps, but you don't know if that silver is a metal, is a name, is a colour. Whereas if you had mapped that data to an ontology, then that word silver would come with a parenthetical name. So you would know that that's somebody's name as opposed to a metal or a colour or something else. And then you've heard a lot about standards. Standards are important because they help in many ways, and certainly when managing data. And we'll go into some of the standards that we've used later. And standards help data become compatible or interoperable. And that's not only important if you want to share data. You may have data that you don't want to share or that legally you can't share. But it's still important to have that data structured to standards to protect it for the future. So some of the key requirements for Arches, pretty clear. We wanted the software to be free, so we've built Arches using all open source tools, and it is indeed free. You can take the software and download it and install it, configure it, and so on. It's a little more than downloading an app and getting it to work, but it is free as far as that's concerned. It's purpose-built for cultural heritage, and we didn't actually realise when we embarked on this how difficult it would be to build something that's as flexible as a system like this needed to be. We knew that in every heritage organisation they have different laws to begin with, or they have different priorities or different kinds of heritage, but we hadn't realised quite what a challenge that would be. But we're now on version 4 of Arches, and we've gotten a lot better at it than we were on version 1 of making it very flexible and customizable. Improvements to the platform can be shared by all, and that's actually one of the stipulations of the license that I'll tell you about in a second. But we want this to be that anybody putting anything into this can be shared by others in the field. That the data and knowledge is protected for the future, I've talked about that, and that it's based on international standards for all those reasons that we've talked about. So the ultimate aim was to improve heritage management, which goes right back to our mission. So this is why we built Arches, because it's what we do, to advance conservation practice, or to help, at least. So common questions about Arches, things that we haven't probably done a good job of clarifying in the past. People say, is it one central system? You know, the Getty is going out there and grabbing everybody's data and building this system in the sky. No, it is not one central system. You saw this map, David had it up, of the implementations of Arches around the world. Regardless of where it is, you take it, you implement it, you do with it what you want. It's your data, completely your data. And actually the next question talks about whether your data is shared or not. And even amongst technical people, we still do find that there's confusion between open source and open data. So open, and many of you will know this, but we still find that some people don't, so we include it each time. So open source is actually the software code. The code itself is open. So when you download Arches, you install Arches, you can actually, if you know Python or if you know some programming languages, you can actually get in there and change it. Whereas, you know, you buy a copy of Microsoft Word, you can't change some of those annoying things that, even if you were skilled enough to do so, that happen in Microsoft Word. But here you can. If you don't like something, if you want it to work differently, you can go ahead and do that. The code is completely open. The data is your data. It can be open or closed. You can be using open source and have completely closed data. They're two totally different things. They really don't have a lot to do with one another. And for the skeptics, you know, is it really free? And I've heard people say, you know, well, you get what you pay for, so you get it free. basically you get nothing because you paid nothing for it. Well, it's free in a way that somebody giving you a puppy would be free. It comes with responsibility. You have to maintain it. You have to look after it. You have to, if you want it to thrive, you need to feed it and love it and whatever else you do with a puppy. Whereas with a beer, if somebody gives you a free beer, you kind of drink it and you're done. The other way of putting this that I've heard more recently, although it doesn't work so well in a slide in a presentation, is that it's free like free speech as opposed to totally free. Talking about open source software. So do you get what you pay for? No, actually you don't get what you pay for. You get what we've paid for in building this, which is a pretty good deal. And this is the license we use, the open source license that we've chosen to use. And as I mentioned before, the only stipulation in this license is that you do agree to when if you should choose to use Archers or install Archers, even if you don't use it for assessment or evaluation, is that if you improve the software in any way, that is thought to be beneficial to others, you must share that. You can't sell that. So you could put money into Archers, you could put resources into Archers and have software developers make it better or build an extension to it. If it's connected with Archers, then you have agreed that you will share that improvement with others. And of course, everybody's doing that, and we've already seen examples of that, and that works pretty well.